Welcome to the sixth video of the Communication and Business Summary. In this final video, we're going to look at the effectiveness of communication and how it can be affected by barriers to communication and how you overcome those barriers to communication. This is all in chapter 14 of your textbook, so I'll just be going through each of the barriers, and if you're not too sure, then make sure you look at chapter 14 of your textbook. So there's nine main barriers to communication to outline in your textbook. So these are things that get in the way of effective communication. So when a message is either changed as a result of something getting in the way of it, or the entire message is not actually received, or the intended message is not received by the receiver. So the first one we have is filtering. Now, filtering is where the sender deliberately leaves something out of the message to make themselves appear more favorable. So for an example of that in a really simple level would be something like a kid going to their mum or dad and telling their mum or dad that their brother punched them, but they haven't told their parents is that before they got punched that they maybe antagonized their brother or sister in a way by pushing them or taking something from them. So they've left that bit of information out to make themselves appear more favorable, and that's filtering. In a business, businesses filter all the time by not including bad information about their products. So, for example, if there's been a high failure rate of a certain piece of hardware, computer hardware that's used, then the business isn't going to communicate that high failure rate to its customers. They're going to leave that out. They're going to want to appear as favorable as possible. Secondly, there's selective perception. Selective perception is the term we use to describe individuals interpreting a message in a different way based on their personal experiences. So the example we often use for this is two people watching a football game watching Collingwood versus Hawthorn. One's a Collingwood supporter, one's a Hawthorn supporter, and a free kick occurs. Each supporter is going to be biased and take the view of whatever's going to support their own team more. So obviously the Collingwood supporter, if it was a free kick for Collingwood, will think, yep, the free kick was definitely there, and the Hawthorn supporter will say, no, there was no free kick there. Obviously not going to happen in every circumstance, but it does generally happen. Based on your own experiences, you might know something about a topic already because of your experiences. So if you've been on holiday somewhere, and a holiday, say, to Germany, and then there is we're talking about cultural communication, and Germany's used as an example, you're going to have more information than other people based on that experience. Now, also, when we talk about things that can get in the way of good communication, there's obviously emotions. Now, at different sides of the spectrum, if somebody's really angry, they're going to perhaps be a little bit shorter with regards to how patient they are with regards to listening to a communicated message. Or if they're in a really good mood, they might be a bit more responsive. So you can imagine if you got home this afternoon from school and your mum told you to clean your room, if it was really, really messy, if you're in a really good mood, you might say, yeah, sure, no problem at all. But if you're in a bad mood, you might say, no, I don't want to, and get angry about it. The same happens in businesses as well. Think about if the person who is serving a customer in a cafe, if they're in a really good mood at work, then they're probably going to do a better job than if they're in a really bad mood because something's bad happened to them in their life. Obviously, the next thing is we use technology a lot more nowadays, and technology can stuff up, and that's why one of the barriers is technological breakdown. So think about if your mobile phone runs out of battery, then you're not going to be able to use it, but you'd intend to send something an SMS, you're not going to be able to use it. So breakdown doesn't necessarily just mean it's actually broken, but for whatever reason you can't use the technology at that point. The fifth one is interruptions and noise. So if often in class there's people in the class who make too much noise, which make it very difficult to hear what the teacher's saying or what somebody else in the class is saying. Interruptions and noise, think about if you're at a party and you're trying to have a chat with somebody. If there's a lot of noise around, it's going to be harder to actually hear what's being said. Now I'm just going to quickly number these, which might help you remember them all. 2, 3, 4, 5. The sixth one is the physical environment. Now, this relates to two things. Firstly, the physical layout of a room, or the place where the communication is happening, and also perhaps the colours that are in that room as well. So physical layout and colours. So we use things like green if we want to send a message of being something being to do with nature. You might not know, but the colour purple has an association with wealth and opulence and something that's sort of rich and nice. You might use yellows associated with things like sun and positivity. Blue can be a little bit cold, and red can be associated with anger and things like that. So think about the colours in the room that the communication occurs as well. Now, probably one of the biggest barriers that can occur is when people use the wrong choice of medium or incorrect choice of medium. So this is where the sender has got a message they want to send, but they have a choice about how they're going to send that message. They send it the wrong way. So imagine that you want to place an order for 100 different pieces of stationery for your office, and you want to put that order in from Officeworks. If you chose to do that verbally, if you chose to ring up and just list through 100 things, there's a good chance that that's going to go wrong. You're going to be much better off putting it into an email or writing it out and then giving it a hard copy giving a copy to the person you're ordering from. If you have something that's quite personal and you want to send a message to somebody that's of quite a personal nature, it's usually better to do it in person rather than by an SMS, because an SMS could be considered impersonal. You can't show any emotions with it, and it's not a very rich form of communication. Finally, the last one I'm going to group together, number 8, is language and cultural differences. So think about if somebody speaks English as a second language, it's going to be harder for them to understand messages that are sent in English. And remember the video we watched about cultural differences in communication as well. So language and cultural differences. So they're the 8 main barriers to communication, the things that can get in the way of effective communication. Now the last thing we're going to look at is how you overcome communication barriers. So how do you break those things down and actually have effective communication? How can the sender send a message that is well understood by the receiver? Now, one of the biggest things, and this goes into the 3-way communication process as well, is you use feedback. So provide opportunities for the receiver to make sure they can tell you, or tell the sender whether they've understood that or not. So for example, as I mentioned before, if you want to send a personal message, it's good to do it in person. In person provides the opportunity for feedback. Sending an SMS makes the feedback a little bit harder. Secondly, you can become an active listener. Now, this is to do with when you are the receiver of communication. Active listening is making sure that you are facing the person when a person's talking to you, that you use physical gestures to show that you're listening to what they're saying, so that might be nodding, and also using your voice, so agreeing with, saying yes, okay, and acknowledging the things they're saying. It also can sometimes be helpful to actually repeat back some of the things that people say to you. So if somebody is giving information to you in class and that they are telling you about communication barriers, it's helpful if you can repeat it back, because it's going to make sure that the person is going to know that you're listening to them. Next, you want to make sure that you're to overcome communication barriers. You should be sensitive to the receiver's values. So this is making sure that you understand the cultural differences to the person you're communicating with, to make sure you don't do or say anything that might be considered offensive. Be sensitive to the receiver's values. Also, just with regards to emotions, it's good to try and constrain your emotions. So don't let your anger get in the way when you're trying to communicate something. Also, try and use simple language, or simplify your language. Don't use things that are too complicated. Now, with language, remember, people can sometimes use a lot of superfluous language or unnecessary words. It's good to be concise and clear with what you're trying to say. Secondly, with your communication, if you're having barriers, you might want to hire a communication professional. So if you're a business and want to do some advertising, it's probably a good idea to try and get an advertising agency to help you with your ad campaign instead of just trying to do it yourself. And finally, to overcome communication barriers, especially in businesses, try not to let the status interfere. Now, what that means is, if you're the boss, if you're the manager of an organization, you want to make sure that your employees can speak to you honestly and they can tell you what they feel, and they shouldn't be scared of you just because you're the boss. At school, something similar would be making sure that your teacher is comfortable hearing what you have to say and will listen to everything that you have to say as well. So don't let status interfere. Now that brings us to the end of this summary of communication in business. So I'm just going to go back to our mind map in our first slide. So we covered the 3-step communication process, how to make communication effective with regards to things like looking for feedback and being an active listener. We looked at the difference between internal and external communication in businesses. We looked at the different types of communication individuals and businesses have available to them, like verbal and non-verbal communication. We also looked at the difference between formal and informal communication. And finally, we finished looking at barriers to communication and how we can reduce those barriers. I hope this summary has been helpful for you, and good luck in your SAC.